But I think I'm a dreamer because I see the world through a lens of what it could become rather than the actual reality of things. So I grew up in Ikorodu in Lagos, Nigeria. After my primary school education, I had to drop out of school for a couple of years because there was just no money to continue to pay tuition. We only had money to survive. There's this learning quote that there are decades when nothing happens and there are weeks when decades happen. And this year has been the weeks when decades happened. It is the quiet years, the quiet decades when nothing happened that you build competence and capacity to handle, the decades in a week. Because if the decades in a week happen and you're not ready for it, then you're going to be crushed under its weight. I also grew up in the slums of Ikorodu, and I understand the pain of poverty and the hunger because no one is going to save us as Nigerians, as Africans. The leaders that must lead must emerge from the same communities that they must serve. That has to happen. The chess tournament we do for the kids. You see that they're dressed exactly like me like this. You see the caps and the native attires. That is very intentional because for the longest time, the portrayal of children in poverty in the slums has always been in a way that sort of demeans them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Founders of Carbon Africa. We're here with Tunde Onakoya, Guinness World Record holder. Tunde, welcome. Thank you for having us here. So tell us, what is Tunde?
Yeah, thank you. Truly honored to have this conversation today. Who is Tunde? Tunde is a dreamer, and I have done many things, and I'll continue to do a lot of things, a lot of new things. But I think I'm a dreamer because I see the world through a lens of what it could become rather than, the actual reality of things. And it's a very idealistic way of living to understand that there are certain inequalities and gaps that exist in society, and somebody has to stand in those gaps. And Tunde is someone who has been privileged to see both sides of the curtain, to being in the midst of extreme affluence and also to be in places where there's extreme poverty, and who is using his talent, his skill of chess to stand in that gap and bring both worlds on both extremes of the spectrum just a little closer through storytelling, through chess. And of course, Tunde is the convener of Chess in Slums Africa, a non-profit organization that uses the game of chess as a tool to give marginalized children access to education and technology and opportunity. And I've been doing that for the last 7 years now. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. So what brought you to chess? What started it all for you?
Some 20 years ago. So I grew up in Ikorodu in Lagos, Nigeria. A really small place in Ikorodu called Isalodo, and we grew up in a very difficult place, right? I remember after my primary school education, I had to drop out of school for a couple of years because there was just no money to continue to pay tuition. We only had money to survive. And that was the reality of a lot of people in that environment, in that community. And which I really do think is the tragedy of poverty. You're born into an environment, you're born into a situation where you're fully conditioned by it before you have your own agency. So, and that to me was the real tragedy of poverty, not the way the West likes to define it as living below $2, daily. It's people are completely removed from systems. So I grew up in an environment like that where education is very undervalued. And because my parents were not educated, they did try to ensure that we could get an education, but it was a constant struggle to put food on the table or also have to pay tuition. So I had to just, give up on education for some time. So, as a 10-year-old kid, I had a lot of time, just playing in the streets. Then one day I stumbled into this barber shop, and it was a local barber shop that also had a game center. And I would see kids there come there to play video games. And I just kept going there, to watch other kids play, even though I couldn't play. Then on one of those days, the barber brought out a chessboard. And it was the first time I ever saw something like that. And I started to ask him, what is this? Is this a donkey? It was no, it's not a donkey. That's a knight. And, I kept going back because And to me, it was love at first sight. I was fascinated by the way the pieces were carved. And it was the kind of thing that, drew out my curiosity, right? So I kept going back. And the more I watched them, the more I started to understand the rules of the game. Then I'll go back home and make my own chessboard. So I got a cardboard, I drew the checkered squares, I molded the pieces with clay. I taught my younger brother how to play. And, I started to like play whatever I learned from a barbershop. I'll come home and try to replicate the same things. And one day he invited me to the table to play. And I lost in two moves. And that became my greatest challenge. I needed to figure out how to not lose in two moves. And at the time, I mean, I didn't understand what chess was doing for me. It was helping me know that I could also be intellectually inclined. It was giving me a way to find my identity outside the situation I was born into. And yeah, I started to get really good. I eventually got back to school. Unfortunately, the school I attended, Intap College, had a chess program. Like we literally learned it as a subject, wrote exams at the end of every term. So that was what exposed me to tournament for the first time. My friend is years later. I met him at the under 10 championship then, which he won, and I came third. So I remember winning a trophy for the first time in my life and coming home with it. And I saw my dad cry for the first time. Nobody had ever won anything. And that was when I knew that I could be good at something, right? That was when I knew that, there were a lot of things I couldn't control, whether I would go to bed hungry, whether I would have new clothes. I couldn't control all of that, but I could control the outcome of the game, if I played well. And it gave me a much deeper understanding of consequences. It gave me a much deeper understanding of, my own mind. It got me thinking about thinking. And so that was what chess did for me. Beyond just the cognitive benefits, it gave me a way to find my place in the world. And the first time I left my community to come to other places, to the city, was because of chess tournaments. And I went on to college on a scholarship, and chess did change my life. And 7 years ago, I decided that I was going to do the same thing for other children like me. So that's the journey.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. So you took up a challenge, which I think is one of the biggest challenges out there, to go ahead and break one of the biggest Guinness Book of World Records. So can you talk about that? What led to that, and why did you take up that challenge as well?
Yeah, like I said, 7 years ago, I decided to focus on the Chess and Slums project. I was quite talented, and I wanted to be a grandmaster, and that was like my dream then. But it wasn't realistic in Nigeria because there are not a lot of rated tournaments, and you probably have to travel to Europe and compete with the best, to even have a chance. So I had to give up on that dream and thought about how I could use my talents instead to serve other people. Right. And it's the thing about talent, skill, whatever capacity you have, whether it's the gift of eloquence, a network, a platform, a specific skill to do something better than other people. When you use it for yourself, it serves you and brings you personal success. And that is good. But when you infuse meaning into it, it becomes something more purposeful, right? So it becomes a gift. It's like I have a talent, it's personal. But when I share that talent with you, it becomes a gift to you. And that was my understanding then, that my talent of chess, I could use it as a gift to impact the lives of other people. And that just became a mission for me. And Chess and Slums, was the vehicle for that mission, And I did it for all of those years, deeply passionately with a team of incredible people who also poured their lives into it. But this year, I decided that I was going to step out of my comfort zone a little bit and go back to playing chess again, right? Which I had stopped for like 6 years. And I think the first real like me playing chess again was in Germany, and I was invited to the DLD conference, one of probably the biggest tech conference, in Europe. And so I played against 10 people. So they brought some players from the chess club and some other people at the conference. And so I won all the games. So the video kind of went viral and everyone was like, wow, how is this possible? For me, it wasn't a truly special thing because, chess is the one thing I know I can do quite well. And it was a moment to like like bring awareness, not just attention to myself, but create awareness about the work that we do to show that yes, Africans, young Black people have so much potential, right? But while talent is universal, opportunity isn't. So how do we begin to like find new ways to equalize opportunity, for the people that would never have the same privilege that we do? And so that was really the intention, but the reception was incredible. Of course, the attention came to me first, but I was able to like turn that spotlight into flashlights, to illuminate the things that I cared very deeply about, or the things I considered meaningful, right? So that was like the starting point. Then that led me to America for the first time. My first time in America was just March this year. I was invited to speak at a conference in collaboration with NASA and Chess and Community. So from there, I decided to go to New York to see my friend. So I'm a founding board member of the Gift of Chess, organization, which has a more global outlook on impact. Chess in Slums is just Africa focused. And I went to see him, and we're just going, in Times Square at night, and we're just two dreamers talking about our dreams and, you know, understanding our place in the world and using, whatever we have to continue to help other people, other children find that sense of belonging, to let the children know that they can do great things from small places. And we just thought about what we could do to let the world care deeply about this thing, because there was so much that is trying to like, there's so much frivolities in the world, a lot of greed. Nobody's like really pausing to think about others. Like, it's this constant chase. So we thought, can we do something truly, truly monumental that would capture people's attention and steer that towards the cause? Because we needed more resource, we needed more reach, we needed to scale. And if you want to change the world, somebody has to pay for it. I'm passionate. I'm willing to give in a lot of my life. The team has given their lives and poured all of themselves into the cause, but it wasn't going to be enough, right? Because we had this mission of like giving 1 million children the gift of chess and raising a new generation of thinkers, of critical thinkers. So I just thought, Ross, why not break the world record in Times Square? And I was like, what is the world record? Say, yes, the longest chess marathon. And we looked it up and it was 56 hours. And I was like, that's impossible. How can you play chess for 56 hours in Times Square? And it's bloody cold. And I was like, well, people did it. There were some guys in Norway. So we can do it too, yeah? So, but the real challenge now was, how do you know that you can do something like that? Do you first like try to stay awake for 56 hours playing chess before now doing it officially? Like, you can't do that. So a lot of like going going ahead with this is just having faith in your ability to do it, having blind faith, right? Because that was the only thing you could control, right? And the more we thought about it, the clearer it became, because I was supposed to leave for Lagos the next day. So I just canceled my flight. I'm like, you know what? We're going to do this. But there were a few hurdles we had to cross. The first one was we had to get the permission from the Times Square Alliance. And it cost thousands of dollars to do an event, at Times Square. So we didn't have any money to do that. So we just went to the office. Thankfully, as we walked into their office, there was some lady there that recognized me from LinkedIn. So that was our entry point. And she was like, okay, what do we need? Oh, we need Times Square for 3 days, April 17th to 21st. She was like, that's insane. Impossible. But she would try. And the thing about like New York is everyone just does everything on the go. So if you're going to get it, yes, you get it instantly. So when she said, oh, she would try, we just knew that it was probably not going to happen. But the next day she just called us and she was like, you guys can do it, but no brand sponsorship, no advertisement, or else you're going to have to pay for that. We're like, okay, no problem, we'll take it. Then the next hurdle was the world record team. They needed like an 8-week period to give approval. So I had to sit down for like an hour and write a very strong email, a very convincing email to let them know how important this was to us and why we were doing it, the reason behind it. And it was such an important lesson that I got to like learn, after all of that experience, that people do not care really about what you do. They care about why you do it. Nobody cares about chess, really, in a sense. It's a very niche, you know, community, mind sports, right? So, but people care about why you do it. And the reason is what reveals the essence of who you are. And people that can resonate with people, even if they don't play chess. And the reason was we wanted to raise $1 million, right, to support education for 1,000 children in Africa. And that was just the goal, right? And we thought we could pull it off by doing something impossible and pushing human limitation and giving the world something new to believe in. And I communicated that, and they gave us the approval the very next day. So we had the two things that we needed. And 2 days before the dates that we had announced, I felt ill. I was nose bleeding and I had a cold. And there was an earthquake in New York as well for the first time in like 200 years. So everything just felt off. And I did think about calling it off. But again, it was just a lot of faith in doing something that no one else had ever done before and trusting that we could go against the grain and still do it. Right. So on that morning, I felt a little better, but I was still nose bleeding. But I just thought, let me just dress up and go to Times Square. Like the team, everyone was already there. And I could just tell them, then maybe we could just cancel or postpone or something. But it was just important to show up first. So I dressed up that morning and I just walked down to the Times Square. And as soon as I got there, I saw Nigerians with flags all over the place. People had traveled all the way from Maryland, from Tennessee, from London. And I was like, people even brought Aboniki for the cold, brought flowers. There was some lady that came with her son. The boy had just lost his father. His father taught him how to play chess. And it was the one meaningful connection they had, And she wanted him to take a picture with me. And it was a lot of stories like that. So I just had to sit down and do it. It wasn't going to happen that I was going to give up, because at that moment, it started to dawn on me that this had become so much more bigger than one person, than one man. It had become a moment where everyone could share in some sense. And we just started, the match was against US National Master Shawn Martinez. And we just kept going. And I remember in the 50th hour, I just looked up. I saw that the entire Times Square was filled with people. Nigerians have come from all over the world, not just Nigerians, people, someone had even paid to have like a picture of me up on one of the billboards. Davido, one of the biggest, Afrobeat artists came, Adekunle Gold. Everyone came to support. People brought gong, there was DJ, there was food, there was music, and it was a party. And we're like front page on the New York Times, on the New York Post, Fox, NBC, everyone was just picking it up that there's a Nigerian chess master hunkered down in Times Square trying to break the world record. And it was just a lot of pressure. So I just had to like block out the noise and focus on the games, right? Because, it was still a very highly cerebral activity. I started to hallucinate a bit. And, we did it. We crossed the 56-hour previous record, went all the way to 60 hours, and, we gave the world something new to believe in. And, when it was done, I just looked up and there was like, the entire Times Square was filled to the brim. And there were people there crying, singing the national anthem. And it was a moment, the best moment of my life. I don't think I'll ever do anything that special. Well, maybe I would, but it has to take a lot to like trump that. But yeah, it was a moment. We didn't hit the goal for $1 million, but we were able to raise about 200,000, but it was a moment. It was a moment for me, then a national moment for everyone else as well. Both the ones that were present in person and all the other people back home as well. So
Are you still are you still continuing to raise that goal?
yeah, of course.
Okay.
It's never ending, because we're trying to change the world at scale. And the more rich, the more impact we'll try to create, the more resource we'll need. So, and that is what makes any idea complete, that other people can find a place in it. I, the storyteller, one, I guess, to tell the stories of the children, that gets to stand in the gap, the people that have the resource, the people that have the competence, the skills, or that convergence helps us to drive impact in a way that is meaningful. It will take time,
Yeah.
but then it happens eventually.
For those who are watching
Mhm.
and they choose to donate,
Yeah.
right? Where can they donate, or how do they?
Yeah, you can check out our website,
Okay.
Chess and Slums Africa. We're also very active on social media. Chess and Slums Africa on Instagram. So all of the links there to support. You can also volunteer your time. You can donate, of course. Then I also share on Twitter, I also share like my own experiences, as a way to help people understand, um, like not just tell stories that feed into like the poverty porn or the way like Africa, marginalized children have always been portrayed, but in a way that dignifies them and reminds us that we're much more similar than different. And the only difference really is opportunity. And it speaks to what I said earlier about talent being universal, but opportunity isn't, right? So
Yeah.
I think it is an indictment on our society that, we have such extremities of like extreme wealth and extreme poverty, right? So for every single one of us with privilege, right? For every single one of them with some capacity to do something about it, then we owe it to the next generation, to the children, to the young people, to become conduits and pay it forward. So check it out, follow our stories, and help us tell people that we're doing great things from a small place.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about
Hmm.
where's the future, right? What does the future hold for chess in the slums Africa? And what is your vision for that?
Yeah, I think, a lot has happened now. This year was an absolutely necessary one. It came with all of the good, the fame, it also came with all of the bad and the ugly, right? But what I've learned is, um, the and there's this learning quote that there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And this year has been the weeks when decades happened.
Wow.
And the thing about like decades happening in a week is it is the quiet years, the quiet decades when nothing happened that you build competence and capacity to handle, the decades in a week. Because if the decades in a week happen and you're not ready for it, then you're going to be crushed under its weight. So I think what a lot of what has happened to me now is I now have a lot of influence and access and also a lot of goodwill, right? And that is the thing about daring so greatly, like flying too close to the sun. You get the admiration of a lot of people if you survive it. And and to me, I'm thinking about the future of chess and slums, the work that I do, and how to use this newly found influence to drive it in a much more meaningful way, right? And how do we continue to construct meaning from our experiences? How do we now use the spotlight and turn them into flashlights, right? And the beauty of like the spotlight being on you is, you know, you're up there on the stage and you're performing and everyone sees you. But the truth is, there's so many other people that will never get a chance in the spotlight. And I say this in the context of the work that we do, that there are 20 million children out of school, for example, right? Very recently, in Ibadan, like 32 children died in a stampede because they were trying to get a plate of rice. And we, we I think for the longest time, we've been like completely inundated by these things and, just completely jaded into like accepting this as the normal, right? Because we feel so powerless in the grand scheme of things, right? And this is where I think I really want to spend a lot of my time, like bringing the world's attention to. Like the children that bear the brunt of our failure of our society. It is the children that bear the brunt of it. And I think about the work that Chess and Slums needs to do for the next 10 years is to use like the programs that we have, like of course, like chess, the cognitive benefits of it, the real impact is in the synapses, right? But beyond that, how can we raise a new generation of children from some of the worst slums across Africa? How can we build some level of critical mass where a million children that get, proper education, a million children that get the gift of chess, the gift of, of the capacity for thought, the gift of being independent thinkers, the gift of being um, critical thinkers and having a place in the world where they can contribute, value, to global markets, global economy. How can we do that in a way that this million children would that have emerged from these communities, from these slums, would also have a sense of duty back to it? Remember, the only reason I'm able to do what I do right now is because I also grew up in the slums of Ikorodu, and I understand the pain of poverty and the hunger, right? Because no one is going to save us as Nigerians, as Africans. The leaders that must lead must emerge from the same communities that they must serve. That has to happen. So I think about what we do as a way to like drive Africa's prosperity. by going back to what is fundamental, education for the children that do not have access, that suffer, a much greater burden than the rest of us, right? And I think we want to continue to do this. I mean, this is my life's work, and our mission is to reach 1 million children. And we have to get there because it is the only way we can truly, truly pay it forward, for the ones that suffer the most. And back against the flashlight is the world sees me now, but they don't see the children that, I talk about. But because they see me, they care about the things I have to say about them, right? And that was what I said about standing in the gap. Somebody has to do it. Someone that has seen both sides of the curtain. And if there's something you observe from like the chess tournament we do for the kids, you see that they're dressed exactly like me, like this. You see the caps and the native attires. That is very intentional because for the longest time, the portrayal of like children in poverty in the slums has always been in a way that sort of demeans them. And I maybe understand it because
Yes.
people would not be people wouldn't be inspired to take action until they see that the situation is dire. So it kind of like evokes pity. But I think there's an emotion that is much stronger than pity, right? It is seeing the children for what they can become, right? And that is like the thing about potential. Potential is nothing if it's not realized. Like Africa has so much potential. I think the children have incredible potential. And if you can find a way to spotlight that, people would see that we have so much more in common, right, than we're different. And it creates, a stronger point of endearment, right, to understand their story and want to be involved in their story as well, right? So this is what the future looks like for Chess Slums Africa. We're currently in our innovation hub in Yaba, serving the children in Makoko. Makoko is the largest floating slum in the world. So the dream is to build hubs like this in every community across Africa. We're in 30 countries now, where we can like create this convergence point for the children to come and learn. You see, we have like our regular chess programs. We have like the robotics. We have the VR headsets. We have the computer labs. We have the machine learning programs. So all of this, like we're thinking about it holistically, right, to shape the next generation of thinkers, for Africa from the slums.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You touched on something earlier that actually really touched me. To actually look at a representation, right? You have these kids from the slums. They see you and they see someone that they know that they can become.
Yeah.
Because you're a familiar face to them, from the dressing to the hat.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's very important. In the 70s and 80s, we would look at grandmasters and they're in suits. And just that mindset alone can drive away a young kid because first you can't even afford a suit. So why should I become a grandmaster, right? So that's very much inspiring, and thank you very much. Thank you for this interview. I think you're a national treasure, and definitely a gift to Africa. So I appreciate
Thank you for the kind words.
for having this interview with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And sorry, I know I'm under the weather, but I really appreciate it.
Right.